In the interest of anyone in the room that might not be completely familiar with the situation in Brazil, which, to be fair, I don't think anyone is up to date these days, we thought about explaining why we wanted to do this event. So why this event now, one day before it's going to be voted in Senate, and very likely that Dilma will be suspended tomorrow. And we found that in most of the conversations about the Brazilian impeachment, there is a lot lacking. Usually you have two groups, one pro-impeachment, another one against impeachment, and the conversation gets polarized, but we never really actually get the underlying consequences of supporting one of these groups. What does it mean institutionally to say you're in favor of impeachment? What does it mean institutionally to say that you're against the coup? So we wanted to start explaining these differences, explain why some people are calling it a coup, why some people are calling it a legitimate impeachment process, and then I'll give a general outline of the legal claims that are supposed to base this request. And this is important so we can have a proportional idea of how almost irrelevant the legal cases become. In the last few weeks and months, very little has been discussed about the legal case. This has completely gone to the sidelines, whereas this should be the motor that is moving the impeachment process. So by having a good idea about the law, we hope to try to understand what are the actual causes of this impeachment if the law, in the end, was the moving engine, but at this point seems to be left to the side. So going back to the two contrasting narratives, you see that in most debates in Brazil at this point, you are either pro-government, either against the government, either pro-impeachment and against the coup. What does that mean? On one hand, we have people that support the coup that say, this is not a coup, this is not a military coup. We are talking about a legally described procedure in the Constitution, a legally described procedure in the impeachment law that allows in situations like this that a president be removed. We're talking about a political process. We're talking about a judgment in Congress that has a political character. So it's obvious that this is not a coup because one, it's in the Constitution. Second, it gets to be voted by Congress. And third, no one anymore argues that Dilma is unpopular. So we're not here trying to take a very popular president out of government. They're trying to do what the people say. So here you have these people saying, this is for democracy. After all, she's not popular anymore. It's not a coup because it's legal or it's in the Constitution and it's a political process. So that's all fine. On the other hand, you have the people that think it's a coup. And they think it's a coup, one, because the mere fact that a process is enshrined in the Constitution doesn't mean that it will be legal or it will be just every time that it's applied. It depends on the facts, it depends on the legal basis, it depends on the specific circumstance. Second, because you will find very few jurists, at least, that justify this as a purely political process. It's political insofar as you have a judgment in the Congress. Congress is a political forum, so you do have this process vested with politics. But it's legal insofar as you have to fulfill some basic prerequisites of what's called a crime of responsibility. So the idea is, once you fill this basic prerequisites, the case goes to the Congress and it's voted. So it's a juridical political process. Another important part of this debate that has a lot to do with institutional rupture and how the choices that we are making right now are influencing decisions that might come up in 10 and 20 years is the fact that we are ignoring the constitutional choice made by our constitutionalists in '88 when we chose a specific system of government. The specific system of government that Brazil chose in popular consultation was presidentialism. It wasn't parliamentarism with a vote of no confidence. It wasn't a presidentialism with a recall voting system. It was a presidentialism in which the utmost punishment, or like the worst, the last remedy to withdraw a president from power would be the impeachment. So this would be in situations where there was a serious attack to the constitutional order, and this would be the last remedy that would be used. And right now, they are saying it's a coup because you're distorting the impeachment that we have in our presidential system to make it look like a recall vote or to make it look like a no confidence vote in a parliamentary system. And this goes directly against the will and the intent of constitutionalists in '88 when our constitution was established. And this as well is another institutional rupture. In that sense, you're already breaking with the original intent of this constitution and distorting the institutes that were created by it. And then finally, I think the last argument on this part has to do with the possibility of the vice president being in charge. So as Dilma's impeachment and Dilma's suspension gets nearer by the day, who knows, it might be tomorrow, Temer, the vice president, Michel Temer, has become more vocal about what kind of document he would implement. And ironically, instead of following the election law of '97, which says a vice president is subordinate to a president, and in case that a president is deposed or can no longer complete the mandate, has to finish the mandate he was elected for, what Temer is doing is ignoring the mandate he was elected for and creating a new government and creating coalitions with the very same political groups that lost the elections 18 months ago. Not only that, he is creating, not creating at this point, but discussing and releasing government programs that involve policies like pulling the plug on constitutional minimum for social security and education, restriction on welfare policies, use of military in rural conflicts, revoking disarmament laws. These are platforms that are the complete different platform that won the election. In this sense, we not only have a vice president in charge, we have a new mandate that's starting, a new mandate without constitutional mandate. So this is the third moment of institutional rupture that people that say is a coup are advocating for. We are not having continuity, we are having a proposal and a platform that lost the election actually being implemented. And this is just another instance where popular vote is not being taken into account. When popular vote isn't taken into account, it's being called a coup. So you have these two narratives and these two reasons why this is a coup. And it's funny because the discussion surrounds these two narratives, but it barely gets to the middle or to the originating point of this narrative, which is what is the impeachment about? Who even cares anymore what the impeachment is about? The media has made such an overwhelming mess of it that even in Brazil or in the US, people have a hard time saying what it's about. We hear a lot about corruption, we hear a lot about Petrobras, a lot about judges doing things that judges shouldn't do. But we don't hear a lot about the actual case. So this impeachment, just to be clear, it's not about corruption. It's not about the Lava Jato, the car wash operation. It's not about illegal leaking of phone conversations. It's about an alleged disrespect to the fiscal responsibility law, to the impeachment law, and to Article 85 of the Constitution. There are two main issues here at play. The first one is pedaladas fiscais, and the second one, pedaladas fiscais in a really poor translation would be something like fiscal paddling, backpedaling, and some supplemental credit decrees that have been approved for 2 months, July and August last year. So in the end, the whole object of the impeachment process are accounting tricks or accounting strategies used by Dilma during her government. And I'll go through these very quickly, but in doing so, I will just make a parenthesis to remind you that there is, besides these two claims, at least 6 or 7 legal points of lack of respect of due process, of misuse and abuse of power in the proceedings, that these claims by themselves would be sufficient to annul this process. The procedural part of this impeachment is so tainted that I'm not even going to get into this because I don't think we'd end today. So I'm going to focus on the first two things. So pedaladas fiscais. Pedaladas fiscais is when the government delays payment to public banks in order to pay for social welfare. The opposition has alleged that Dilma broke the fiscal responsibility law by hiding liabilities for social programs on the books of state banks, as opposed to having it funded directly from the budget. According to them, this created an artificial reduction of the budget deficit in a year that it was politically convenient for her. So like in an election year, she needed to show better economic results, and she camouflaged the account in this way. To begin with, there are several problems with this claim. And it's actually amazing that in an impeachment process in a country as large as Brazil, the two jurists that proposed this impeachment claim actually confuse throughout the 180 pages that they write what is financial law and what is budgetary law. And it's surreal. Like, the mistakes are unbelievable. And that's the first problem here. So to begin with, they say the impeachment law of 1950 says that crimes against the budget can be impeachable offenses. What the authors in the petition are claiming are that Dilma has broken the law of fiscal responsibility. So to begin, fiscal responsibility and the budget law are two different things. They come from two different areas of law, they have two different systems and two different requirements. One of them predicts income and expenditures, that's the budget law, and the other one are general financial norms that elaborate and fiscalize the annual budget law. So it does not define income or expenditure. It has nothing to do with the definition of income and expenditure, and that is the origin of a supposed crime of responsibility. So if you have a law that doesn't even touch upon these issues, you cannot be tried for a crime of responsibility. What the accusation did is that they said, this is all relevant, let's group this into a block of norms to see if we can try to fit this under the 1950 law and qualify this as an impeachable offense. And of course, this is not only technically wrong, this is legally absurd. So mixing up these two branches of law and trying to stretch interpretation to make this fit into a legal claim is just the first of many absurds that you see in this petition. Even if we were for a minute there to consider that you can actually do this, that you can actually bring fiscal responsibility law into the impeachment claims, into the impeachment law, they also do something that's equally absurd, saying that the loans or the delayed money to the banks are de facto loans. What does that mean? De facto loans means that the late payment to the banks are actually the same thing as a loan and a credit operation between the government and federal banks. And this is also an outrage because it's the same thing as you, for instance, you go into the supermarket and you're paying your electricity bill and you forgot to pay it at a specific time. Yes, you're in contractual breach. Yes, this is not probably fiscally responsible. You might have to pay interest, you might have to pay a fine, but this does not mean that the electricity company is lending you money. They have a right of credit towards you, but this is not an operation of credit. And this confusion, saying that if you owe banks money, or if you owe bank money, you officially and automatically engaged in a loan, is again another extensive interpretation that shouldn't be allowed, especially at a crime called the impeachment crime and crimes of responsibilities, where it's necessary that there be a serious attack on the constitutional order. This has never been declared a crime in Brazilian history. From 2015, when the 2014 accounts were judged, there was a change in jurisprudence saying that this was irregular. Since then, the government never did this again, and even more that, they can't be judged for something that wasn't a crime when it was first executed. So there is no way to kind of understand how this supposed credit operation could be deemed to be, one, irregular, and second, an impeachable offense under the highest legal standard available. And just to finish off, we have the exact same problem with the supplemental degrees. We have a confusion between what is supplementary degrees changing how money is spent, and what is contingency degrees actually affecting the amount of income and money that's coming in and actually setting new limits for the government. Again, with a jurisprudence that permitted it. Again, during a time where it wasn't considered irregular. And it's important to realize that both for pedaladas fiscais and for the supplemental decrees, there needs to be intent. There is no crime of responsibility, no impeachment of impeachment crime that has no intent. So unless you can prove that Dilma had specific intent to give a fraudulent state of accounts, which is impossible given that she was following orders and following documents for more than 20 organs that have a presumption of legality and a presumption of legitimacy, there can't be a crime of responsibility. So this is just a brief overview on how complex and how just badly crafted and how hard these jurists have tried to adapt or find a problem that could fit under the impeachment law. And it also brings the question, how is law being used in this impeachment process? We have the super weak case here. We have a case that confuses basic institutions of law. Is law being constitutive? Is it an instrument of serving politics? What does it happen when a legal case is used to serve political interests? First, it becomes sidelined, like we've seen here. This is not even a discussion. Second, it affects directly the legitimacy of not only the legal organs, but the democratic aspect of the impeachment vote. So this is just a general outline, so you can have an idea of what is behind the impeachment process. Now we can move on to our first panelist.